Hello everyone, this is Damon with Pixnub.com. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create a flare effect such as this using a new set of brushes that I just released on our website. You can see the image here without the flare. This is the original image, and then the image with the flare effect. If you have not already watched the first video I recorded for these flares showing how to use the overlay layers, I suggest watching this first. There are 75 flares in this set, and each flare comes with both an overlay file and a brush. And the overlays you'll want to use for flares that have multi-colors in the flare. If you want to retain all of those colors, you'll use the overlay file. And you'll see this is an example of one of the overlay files. For the cases where you want a single color in the flare, in that case, you'll use the brush. And as mentioned, each flare comes with both the brush and the overlay file for the same flare, and there's 75 flares. So you get a total of 150, well, you get 75 of each. So you get 75 brushes and 75 overlay files. So there is a right and a wrong way to use brushes to create this effect. And if we look at the original image here, these flares in the center of the image, these are from the photo itself. These are not brushes. And you can see that the center of the light source is bright white, and you get the color where the light falls off into the flare rays. And this is how your camera will expose. And that's the effect we're trying to create here with that bright white center, and to where the color is on the rays. That way it doesn't look dull and unnatural. So I'm going to show you first the wrong way to do this and then the right way, because I think that most people don't actually know the proper way to do this, and I've seen it done wrong a lot. So I'm going to throw these layers away, and what most people are going to do is they're going to just create a new blank layer and then just paint directly in that layer. So let's grab a color and then see what that looks like. Okay, and by the way, when you select these brushes, you're going to first need to set the size of the brush. So I selected the brush, but it's only 20 pixels, and that's because the last brush I used was 20 pixels, and I chose for this set to not have the preset set the size of the brush for you, because that becomes annoying if you're working on a smaller document and you got your brush too large, and every time you select one, it resets the size. So you'll set the size first. You can see the size of our brush here, and then every time we select a new brush, it's retaining that same size. Now if you want to load the native size of the brush, you can see all of our flare brushes here. If you select them from the brush settings window, it's going to set the size of your brush here. Let's get both windows open so you can see here. Okay, so if you select it from the brush settings window here, you can see that it's setting the size to the native size of the brush. However, if you don't want that, if you want it to keep the same size when you switch brushes, select it from the brushes window. All right, so let's grab the brush we want. Again, let's go set the size back to what we want and just paint in the layer. So you can see how dull that looks, and that is because how brushes actually work is they don't contain brightness information. You're painting a solid color, but what the brushes have is transparency information. So if we hide the layer below it, we'll see that it's solid in the middle and the transparency fades. But that's not what we want. We want the brightness to be bright white in the middle and then it to fade into color. So doing a single layer, there is no way to really create that specific effect we want to look natural here. So there's a few ways to do this, and this is the way I'm going to show you that I like the best. And the first thing is to create a new solid color layer and set that to black. and then use screen blending mode. The next thing I'm going to do is select a color that I want using a solid color layer and set this to 100% saturation, 100% brightness, and then just use the hue you want for the color. Now don't worry if this is too saturated because we're going to tone that down with the opacity of this layer. So I'm going to go 210 on the hue, 100% saturation, 100% brightness. For the opacity, I'll start with like 30%. I think it's a good starting point, but you can adjust that as necessary. And then I'm going to set this layer to color blend mode and clip that to the first color fill layer. Now I'm going to create a new layer in between these and just use a transparent layer, just normal blend mode. And the reason I didn't create this layer first is because if you create an empty layer and then create the color layer, it will merge these two together. It's just kind of a quirk with how Photoshop works. I think it's by design, but in any case, create the color fill layer first, then select the one below and create your blank layer. So what you're going to end up with is a black layer set to screen blend mode, a normal layer, completely transparent with a clipping mask to that, and then a color fill layer with a color set 100% saturation, 100% brightness, hue of whatever you want, set to color blend mode, also clipped, and then usually adjust the opacity down. We'll start with 30%. So now we're going to paint in this empty layer. But we don't want to paint a color. What we want is to paint pure white. So you can just reset the swatches and switch background and foreground too to get white. But we're going to paint white directly in there. And so by using this layer set up like this, you can see that it's bright white in the center. And then the color is being applied here. You see without it, it's just a white light. But with it, we have color, and we can adjust the opacity to whatever we want for the opacity. I think maybe around 45%. And then you can also adjust the color of your light as well. And then, of course, adjust the opacity as needed. I'm just going to cancel here because blue is what we want. So really, really simple to do it that way. Another thing, too, is by doing it this way, we can create a new layer in between there. And then we can go grab a different brush. And by the way, this set comes with, like I say, there's 75 brushes, but you've got different focal lengths and different apertures, and I actually used 3 different lenses, and everything is labeled accordingly. So let me grab a brush at f22. So you can see the difference with f22 versus f5.6 on the aperture. I tried to create these brushes to give you a variety of different looks, so you can just choose the one that works best. And I think these look a lot more natural too than brushes that are hand created in Photoshop. And that's why I created this set, is I wanted some brushes that looked more like real flare, because I actually shot images of a strobe in the dark to create these. These are not hand created in Photoshop. These are created with a real lens and a real strobe, so it just has a much more natural look. But anyway, by using 2 layers now, we have each of these flares on its own separate layer. And you can make as many layers as you want. Just make sure that the entire stack is clipped to that solid black layer below. So really cool. I've got a couple more videos I'm going to be doing for flares and what you can do with these flares as well. So be sure to check out those as well. Thanks for watching.